Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Data is Your Problem, Data Integrity and Generative AI. Thank you all so much for coming today, and we have a bunch of information coming to you. I'm Jacob Lukowitz, Multimedia Editor at SD Times. And before we get started, I have a couple of quick housekeeping announcements. First, this webinar will be recorded and available on the sdtimes.com website about 24 hours after the event. Secondly, if you have any questions at any time during the presentation or the live panel, feel free to ask them on the chat tab over to the right side. Now for today's webinar topic, we'll explore the critical role of data integrity in the successful implementation of GenAI, a topic that I'm sure is on everyone's minds right now. So for today, while general AI presents a clear competitive advantage, most companies are struggling to actually harness it. From ineffective outputs to costly missteps, GenAI is driving significant financial losses as companies invest thousands in models that don't work. But the core issue isn't the technology itself, it's the data that powers it. So to start things off, we have John Jeske. He's the CTO for the Advanced Technology Innovation Group at KMS Technology, and Jeff Scott, the SVP of Delivery Operations at KMS Technology, and who will be leading the presentation. And then for the live panel, we'll have our very own David Rubenstein, the Editor-in-Chief of SD Times, joining us. So welcome to the webinar, John and Jeff. It's great to have you here.
Thanks.
Likewise. Yeah. Thanks, Jacob.
Great. Yeah, so to get things started, I'll throw it over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here with everyone. Obviously, John and I work for a company called KMS Technology. For the last 15 years, we've been building software and working with clients on big data challenges. More and more attention has recently been placed on data and data quality in our conversations with our clients. I'm often reminded of a key leadership question that I've been asked through my career and I've used throughout my career as well. Do you think or do you know? And it's important in our world today that to make fact-based decisions, not to guess. Our leadership really expects this, and being able to back up decisions with data raises the confidence level for everyone that's involved. This brings us back to data and the topic of our webinar today. If decisions are being driven based on the data, it needs to be accurate, needs to be up to date, and needs to be relevant. And then you add generative AI into the mix, and the speed at which decisions can and will be made increases exponentially. So this all kind of drives us really back down to the sense of urgency that John and I feel about this topic today. Now, John, before we jump into the details, let's address the elephant in the room, generative AI and ChatGPT. It gets mentioned a lot, gets thrown around a lot, and it's really captured our attention and imagination over the past year. What do you think has been driving all the buzz, and how has it really changed our world in the last year?
Oh man, Jeff. Yeah, it seems like generative AI is everywhere you look, right? If artificial intelligence had been a hazy abstraction for a lot of people, ChatGPT certainly drove it squarely into our collective consciousness when it bounced onto screens just over a year ago. And it's managed to generate more than a little buzz as it's upended how we think about human computer interactions. But by placing artificial intelligence in the hands of anybody with a smartphone, a laptop, or a workstation, generative AI is bound to join technologies like the internet, smartphone, and cloud computing with the impact it's making on access to information, our productivity, and innovation, frankly. I mean, we look at the uptake statistics for ChatGPT are already legendary. 1 million users in 5 days, 100 million users in under 2 months. If we think about the number of models that were posted to Hugging Face last year, over 300,000. The energy and the effort that's going into figuring this technology out is really extraordinary. And one of the key aspects of that is the accessibility of LLMs, of large language models, and their facility for content generation. It's really fueled a surge of innovation across verticals, across disciplines, including things like data analysis, marketing, customer service, logistics, drug discovery, and of course, software coding. We've also discovered that they can make stuff up, like a kid who didn't read the assignment. There are a couple of attorneys who will not forget to check their ChatGPT citations before they go to court the next time. And a couple of weeks ago, on the eve of the Super Bowl, Gemini and Copilot spun up extravagant narratives with post-game highlights of the 49ers' victory over the Chiefs, complete with stats. Gemini had Patrick Mahomes running for 286 yards and 2 touchdowns, but with a final score of 34-28 49ers. Both of the chat models placed the game on Saturday the 10th instead of Sunday the 11th.
Yeah, that's crazy. Generative AI has certainly generated a lot of interest, and it's also put a lot of pressure on IT leaders to do something with it. Now, John, we always talk about in our conversations weekly how to get started in integrating generative AI into our workflows and into the products we build. And it's always best that we find to define a real problem or a business case to solve with the technology. But what doesn't get talked about enough is the fact that data is really key to ensuring whatever you do is going to add value, right?
Yeah, Jeff, that's really true. Models are temporary things and they're subject to refinement, replacement, and the next shiny new algorithm that comes along. But a solid data foundation can serve a wide array of analytic purposes. For lots of organizations, though, the thing that really stands in the way of realizing the full benefit and potential of generative AI is data quality. I mean, you remember in a recent conversation we had with a company that we've worked with over time, they
Yeah.
told us how they'd committed considerable resources to developing a predictive analytics model trained on an extensive and heterogeneous data set. And unfortunately, they didn't invest enough in verifying the accuracy and completeness and the overall quality of the data on the front end. And what they ended up with after all that time and expense was was a model that produced conspicuously impossible results. Stories of what poor data quality can do to generative AI systems are numerous and infamous. We think about last year, Gannett's lead AI, the local sports story generator that went badly off the rails and produced incomplete, incoherent articles. Social media shaming caused Gannett to end that phase and rethink their approach entirely. And also last year, the iTutor group netted a $365,000 fine for age discrimination by its AI-based recruiting software. Kind of highlights the danger of bias in training data. If we think back during the early days of COVID, there were numerous attempts to develop diagnostic tools using artificial intelligence and machine learning, and a great many failures that were attributed to data quality, especially to mislabeled data and data of unknown provenance. All the mechanics of large language models content generation are still a little bit mysterious, and the ability to produce toxic responses lives just behind that thin barrier of alignment training. Now, several researchers recently demonstrated that they could circumvent the alignment guardrails by appending carefully structured strings to prompts that would normally elicit a polite refusal. These types of adversarial attacks seem to work across large language models and highlight the point that objectionable content from training data remains present in the model and is just masked by the alignment process. The nut of it is the data abides. The data is the real enduring source of value in the AI pipeline, and it's the place to start an AI journey.
So what you're saying is data integrity really matters. Those stories are just a few of the high profile stories that many of the folks in the audience have probably heard of. And it's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to poor outcomes for companies that lack focus on data integrity. If those stories aren't enough to influence change within an organization, let's dig a little deeper into the risks that exist. Learning systems consume planetary planetary volumes of data, lots of data, and generative AI in particular has a very big appetite. Any AI system is only as reliable as the data that trains it. So to produce meaningful results, a model needs to work with complete and accurate data. Some of the risks of not preparing your data include incorrect outputs and computations, perpetuating biases like the story that John mentioned above, or outputs that are too generic and they lack the nuance or the relevance to your use case. Some of the risks downstream: invalid model output leading to bad decisions that could cost you for years down the road. And if you think about the democratization of data access through generative AI, it increases the potential for putting bad data in the hands of a larger part of your organization and can make the problem even worse, or the risk even higher. We also need to think about compliance. Regulatory frameworks taking shape in the EU, Washington, and most recently California are going to likely require data controls to achieve complete compliance with transparency requirements, model development, and management practices. In the US, there's something like 407 bills in 44 states related to AI now in process. So this is certainly something to watch. Now, John, there's a lot of energy going into evolving generative AI as a technology, and ChatGPT, if you will. There must also be a lot of innovation in data management as well. So before we move into the live panel portion of the webinar, can you help us understand some of the approaches that companies are implementing to mitigate some of the risks we talked about?
Sure, yeah. I mean, like I mentioned before, there's so much energy going into this space today. We expect to see an even more aggressive proliferation of generative AI and AI use cases in general that are going to require ever greater data management discipline to support and manage larger and larger volumes of data. Now, beyond content and image generation, increasing interest in powerful tools like autonomous agents and simulation technologies like digital twins inescapably lead to increased focus on data quality to be able to feed these new tools to support them. And it makes getting data right even more important. One of the things that I really expect to see is the kind of a long overdue awareness of data as a product and the commensurate emphasis on data management to ensure and sustain the quality of that product. In that paradigm, data providers need to think about data consumers as customers and the data as a product unto itself that they're responsible for delivering. And there's kind of a natural progression to that, from conceptualizing data as a product to evolving the data, to evolving to a data product itself with the necessary workflows and provisioning architecture to consistently deliver that product. Data volumes are going to increase significantly. And to meet the challenge, or continue to increase significantly, what am I talking about? And to meet the challenge of scaling systems to accommodate that growing volume of data, I kind of think we're going to see a movement away from single silos of data, the conventional data warehouse structure, to more distributed data repositories and towards application and repository spanning integrations. Now, I don't see decentralization as a positive development necessarily, but I think it's inevitable because managing single consolidated data stores and the ETL processes to sustain them is going to become too much of a bottleneck, considering increasing data volumes and velocity. And the accelerating rates that we've become accustomed to make that even more difficult to sustain. But that said, it seems likely that generative AI itself will take a larger role in analyzing, classifying, and labeling data to support modeling and generative AI projects down the road. And generative AI can potentially automate the more tedious chores for data management to make the entire management process faster and more efficient. But thinking about decentralized data leads us to consider new approaches to data management, and especially integration technologies like data fabrics and data mesh to help enable more extensive access and utility across heterogeneous data landscapes, and also to make the entire process of data management more efficient and faster, as we said. Essentially, increasing data volumes and new data intensive use cases and the spread of data democratization that Jeff mentioned earlier really point to a greater importance of data quality and the need to have a sustained program to assure the quality, accuracy, and availability of your business data.
Very good. Well, thank you, John. Thank you, John, for going through that. I think, Jacob, we are ready to jump into the live panel.
Yeah, absolutely. And awesome presentation. I love a lot of the sports analogies there. Really drive home. Great. And for the live panel section, I'd like to invite David Rubenstein to join us. And I encourage anyone attending to drop any questions over on the right chat tab. Feel free to ask a question now, and we'll get them answered for you at the Q&A section at the end. So yeah. Let's see. Once again, I'd just like to invite David Rubenstein to join us. But in the meantime, hi, David.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Here, loud and clear.
Okay, great.
Good to have you here. Great.
Good to
Yes.
be here.
So to start off, I found it very interesting some of the sections that you were talking about, finding data provenance. It seems like we're still very much in the early stages of finding the strategies and the frameworks to approach data integrity. But in your view, what are some of the best ways now to approach data integrity?
You want me to start?
Anyone, you can start, David.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've written a lot about this, over the years. This has always been an issue for organizations. And, especially in today's world with data coming in on the edge, data being stored in the cloud, data just exploding in volume, integrity is critical so that businesses can make good decisions based on the data that they have. And what we've seen is some of the things that people do to maintain integrity, is clearly validating it as soon as it is being input, deduping items in the database, and of course, training people on how to do good data entry. So I think those are some of the steps that people can use to begin to ensure that their data is good.
Absolutely. John or Jeff, would you like to follow up on that?
Yeah, sure. Establishing clear policies and procedures for data governance to address handling, storage, and data sharing is critical. And like Dave said, implementing robust data management practices like regular audits, validation processes are critical. Encryption and access controls are really essential aspects of sustaining data integrity.
I agree, and I'll just add the don't forget the emphasis on training people on what they need to do around the policies and practices around managing the data, because data quality is everybody's problem and everybody's responsibility, and everybody can play a role in that.
Yeah,
I know we didn't touch much on the access controls as well as a critical piece of maintaining data integrity. Who can touch, who can't, who should be dealing with it, who should be watching it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads into my question, like what strategies can allow for better for training and awareness for ensuring data integrity within an organization? How can organizations educate their employees to make sure that they have these guardrails in place? John or Jeff, would you like to start off with that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
sure.
can.
Go ahead.
I can start with a couple of things. As John talked about the data mesh and the data fabric and having teams across the organization managing the data on their own and kind of contributing to that overall governance and framework. I think having those cross-functional teams with shared goals and shared objectives and how they're managing data and the consistency in the way they apply the policies is a good place to start.
Right. Yeah. And we actually had a question coming in from our audience is, what do you think about RLHF? Does the panel not think it would be able to handle bad data scenarios?
Well, and not entirely, and that's one of the things that we mentioned earlier. Reinforcement learning and human feedback helps to align the model, but it doesn't remove the existence of toxic data from the model, from the training data that's embedded in the model. And that's one of the things that folks have discovered recently is the ability to extract that toxic data by appending carefully crafted strings of data, of carefully crafted strings to prompts. So, you know, it's an important aspect of establishing guardrails, but it can be subverted. So it's not entirely a solution unto itself.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Would anyone else like to add to that? No? Well, thank you very much, Mahendra, for asking that question. Yeah, another point that often gets brings up is how can you quantify the value of the data?
Oh man.
Mhm.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'll take a stab, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we've seen organizations do, and a lot of this ties back to what we talk about when we write about things like value stream management and things of that nature. So it's really about collecting transactional data that you get from your customers to gain some deeper insights into their behavior and what they're doing. And also being able to see the business impact of those relationships and how to kind of tighten things up to make sure that you are delivering the value. So some organizations create what they call value architectures that can tie value drivers to the company goals, and that seems to be a good place where people are starting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. John and Jeff, would you like to add to that? I know it's a big topic, big question.
Yeah, I like to think of the if you think about quantifying the value of data and data integrity, I think about what's your time worth to you, because the problems that are caused by bad data multiply the time you spend doing on wasted activity to clean up and fix problems. And I think spending a little bit of time in the front end to make sure your data is right, good inputs gets good outputs, is more than worth the investment. But there's other things. Good data helps your teams go more efficient as well in terms of making good decisions
Mm-hmm.
in process and in development as well. And I think those are all things that we measure today, and then you can see the increase that by focusing on implementing a data integrity program, you should be able to see the baseline of performance from one point and then measure the lift that gives you in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah, absolutely.
to dive into the nerdy weeds of things, there are computational methods for attempting to quantify data value. And the three principal methods are intrinsic value of information, business value of information, and the performance value of information. And those are pretty widely known means of attempting to calculate data value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things, it's there's a cost to maintain data. Organizations today are just collecting everything, and many organizations don't use a lot of it, and ultimately a lot of it never gets used. So, what are the costs and the risk and the return on certain types of data that you're collecting that you may never look at? So, those are decisions that need to be made.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely seems like with all these data compliance initiatives, a lot of times having the wrong data or incorrect data could actually wind up costing a whole lot more. Right. So thank you for all of your insight on that. Yeah, and during the presentation, John, there was one interesting thing that you brought up that came to my attention. You were telling about the audience about a decentralized data can help with increased adoption of data fabrics and data mesh, and that this is not necessarily a positive move, but it's almost inevitable. Can you kind of expand on that and see?
Yeah,
and
mm-hmm. It really derives from the increase of stepping back for the last 25 years, everybody's been dazzled by the increasing volume of data that we create with applications and tools, and now with the number of edge devices that are generating data. So the volume and velocity of data is escalating exponentially, as I think everybody's come to terms with. But managing that in the more traditional sense of data warehousing is becoming problematic because of that volume. And maintaining quality and the ingestion of the data can be a bottleneck to those single data silos. So a lot of folks are beginning to talk about means of integrating data that step back from or above the single silo of data and look more towards the integration of data from sources to manage the cleansing and assimilation of that data for things like training large language models, for things like training artificial intelligence. And data fabric is one of those approaches that's kind of been out there, been talked about for several years, that uses tools like large language models to add intelligence to the data integration layer and help provide consistency and integrity. And it relies heavily on generating metadata to provide guidance for access and manage permissions and so on.
Yeah, this is very interesting. So one of the other points is, like, now that generative AI becomes an initiative for the whole entire organization, a lot more people are involved with it. What are some of the strategies that could allow for better collaboration between data teams and AI developers to help ensure that data integrity? John or Jeff, would you like to add something on that?
Well, sure. One of the things that one of the approaches is to build cross-functional teams that encourage regular interaction amongst data professionals and developers, the folks that are stewarding the applications that provide the data, and the folks that are building things with the data, so that there's consistent communication there. And on the front end, establishing a shared sense of objectives and how we're going to measure those objectives, including structuring key performance indicators relating to data quality and AI outcomes.
Yeah. We've also seen we call them technology guilds at KMS, but just knowledge sharing sessions and different workshops where your data team and your development team, or your data engineers and your AI developers, can collaborate on a regular basis on a variety of these topics. When there's a new regulation that's coming up that everybody needs to pay attention to, you need to be able to apply that to your code. You need to apply that to the way you manage data, and you need to know where what the right use of data is or isn't throughout the process.
I think organizations are starting to realize that data integrity is collaborative. It's not just in the bailiwick of data scientists, but now everybody in the organization really kind of has to have input and be part of the team in terms of making a lot of these decisions regarding the data.
And the collaboration is really a key concept in maintaining data integrity and data quality. And that's one of the things, like Jeff said, the guilds have been extraordinarily useful for us in sharing information and helping establish a shared understanding of what we're doing with the data and what we need to be able to accomplish on a continuing basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So another question is, you mentioned a lot of these, the benefits of the data integrity throughout the presentation, but what are some of the biggest benefits or the biggest highlights that companies immediately see once they take on data integrity as a key initiative? Would you like to start with that one, John?
Sure. Well, I think the big one is improved decision making. Having accurate and reliable data on the front end inevitably leads to better business insight, post analysis, right? Another critical aspect is establishing and maintaining customer trust.
Absolutely. absolutely.
high data quality, gives everybody confidence in the data, and in particular in the products and services that you're providing the customer.
Well, and
Mhm.
I talked a little bit about the regulatory issues as well. If you stay compliant, you avoid fines, you avoid big problems for
Mhm.
your organization, and just ensuring adherence keeps everybody in line with the laws, and you avoid the fines and all those legal issues that come with
Mhm.
it.
Right. Absolutely. David, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, the one thing that I just would add when we're talking about things like data integrity and data governance is that I think there needs to be a mind shift where people are thinking less about control over the data and more about how do we enable the organization to reap the benefits of all the data that they have.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's certainly key to optimal data monetization is that democratization process, but it relies entirely on being able to assure the quality of the data that's going into the system.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Jeff, you had mentioned the increased demand on compliance and increased importance of that. So, how are you seeing that global data privacy regulations are impacting data integrity strategies and how companies are taking that on and treating it more seriously now?
Well, the minute that fines are levied, it becomes more and more people pay more and more attention to it. So everybody's
Absolutely.
waiting for the rulings to come out and what are the penalties going to be, and then it
Hmm.
becomes more and more important. And as we see more and more of those stories come out, it just becomes it's a board level topic. How are we ensuring that we are compliant? How are we ensuring that we are managing this? And the
Right.
priority of these stories in their backlogs of work become
Hmm.
higher and higher on the list of things to do.
Definitely
Yeah. Absolutely.
focuses the mind.
I'm curious
Yeah.
to know,
Yeah.
just as a side note, how many
Hmm.
organizations are flying under the radar of GDPR and some of these other, rules that are coming down of how data is handled and used and shared and sold and things like that. Obviously, data is enormous. Every organization has it, and certainly the regulators can't look at every organization and see what's going on. The big guys are the ones who get punished the most. But I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about is there really compliance with these regulations in many of the smaller organizations?
Yeah, I'll tell you
Good point.
that's a great question, and we work quite a bit with smaller organizations, particularly in our due diligence practice, and there is a really acute high level of awareness of the regulatory environment among the folks that we've worked with in the last couple of years. I've been really impressed by that. It's one of the things that they really that they'll bring forward in conversations and describe their compliance practices.
Hmm.
Well, good to know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very interesting. Can you share some of the common pitfalls that companies encounter when trying to maintain data integrity for Gen AI projects, and how these can lead to financial losses?
Well,
Mhm.
the one that we've kind of been beating this dead horse a little bit is
Mhm.
just overlooking. You fall into the pitfall of overlooking your privacy regulations and all those things that are coming in and
Mhm.
keeping up with them. Those can get you out of compliance very quickly and are difficult to get back in. Um, and just the bad data quality and bias can give you the incorrect or the improper results from your implementation of an AI solution.
Mhm.
So again, the main point we're making here is pay attention to your data quality, pay attention to the inputs, pay attention to the governance of that, because it will only damage things in the end.
Right. Yeah.
One of the
John, would
things,
you like that? Mhm.
yeah, one of the things that can be difficult is particularly as you're bringing in outside data to help to supplement machine learning models or uh, retrieval augmentation in the case of generative AI, is ensuring that the data provenance, like where it came
Mhm.
from and what its lineage might be,
Mhm.
because that in order to maintain transparency and build confidence with the customer, being able to describe the sources of the data, I think is increasingly important.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we've seen instances of organizations using like open data and finding that they could be running up into some problems of
Mhm.
as you said, ownership and usability.
Yeah. Very interesting.
It leads, it ties itself somewhat to the growing problem or evaluation of generating synthetic data with AI tools itself, and what that really represents, what it might represent in terms of potential continuing bias or errant data, since it's based on yet another training data set, but one level of abstraction away.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for all of your insight. And as we draw towards the end of the webinar, I'd like to encourage anyone in the audience to ask any more questions to be answered live by our panel. Yeah, so looking ahead towards the future, how do you see the role of data integrity evolving in the context of GenAI and the initiatives that organizations are taking on to make that more of a priority?
Jeff, you want to start?
Yeah, so education is key. So raising up the importance of data quality and the impact it can have in your organization is important. A lot of training sessions, not just data security and privacy, but the governance and the impact and the use of how this data is applied in the AI models is important. And it really it's got to be embedded within the culture of the organization. That way you avoid a lot of problems if it becomes part of what you do all the time.
Boy, that's the real truth of it. And institutionalizing data management strategies and the organization's approach to assuring data quality, as Jeff said, I think it is a vital educational pursuit for organizations, particularly growing organizations where they're adding staff and bringing new people on board, and extending that piece of culture is, I think, going to become more vitally important as time goes.
And just even
Absolutely.
adding on to that, the as organizations use other firms or they bring more people into it, every organization is growing, and you've got to constantly train new people in, because that's your weakest point is the least amount of training, or the least amount of the least trained person in this world. So having that process in place is key.
Yeah, that really brings that in terms of collaboration, intra-organizational collaboration, that I think is a key feature. One of the conversations that needs to be had early on in the development of a relationship with another organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's all great advice for companies that are just starting their journey in GenAI and managing their data. Yeah. So it seems like we covered a lot of ground here in today's webinar. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about where you see the field going, or key highlights that our audience could take away?
Oh, Jacob, man, this is nuts, right? The last year has been completely insane with the amount of energy and development and the work that's gone into artificial intelligence tools and products, and the thinking that's gone into building new tools with this technology. And to think that that the real core technologies have only been around for 6 or 7 years, and we suddenly has changed everything, right?
Absolutely.
And I expect that to continue.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that we were covering, even just like 3 years before, were data is the product, data is the new gold, right? But who would have known that it would be used now for feeding GenAI and what it's capable of doing at this point? Yeah.
And who would have guessed that you needed an entire internet full of it to make?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, great. So is there anything else you'd like to add, Jeff or David, before we wrap things up?
No, David, anything?
Nope.
Well, I just want to apologize for my camera not working, which is why nobody is seeing me and just hearing me. But I think this has been a great session to raise awareness again about the positive benefits of data governance and data integrity, and what could happen if you don't use it correctly, and of course the impact it's going to have on creating these language models and things, it's going to be great to watch and to continue to cover. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The last thing I'll add is just, if there's companies out there looking for advice on how to get started, if you're not started down a journey of protecting your data in a data integrity manner or data governance strategy, it is important to get started, invest in data management, establish some solid data governance and quality management practices, prioritize data security and privacy, and ensure you're compliant with your global regulations and data protection regulations. Fostering that culture, that data-centric culture, is important. Keeping the education strong with anybody you bring on board, and reinforcing that every year through your refresher trainings. And where needed, when you don't have all the expertise in-house, not everybody knows how to do this stuff. Reach out and leverage experts. Reach out and and leverage consulting partners like us or other companies that are in this space to help raise the bar and raise the level of understanding in your organization, and put your organization on a path to protecting and really governing your data in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of great information for the audience we had today. Is there anywhere that they could reach out or learn more from KMS Technology?
Absolutely. Hit me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. So that's all the questions we had. Thank you all for this presentation. Again, that was John Jeske. He's the CTO for Advanced Technology Innovation Group at KMS Technology, and Jeff Scott, SVP of Delivery Operations at KMS Technology. And thank you to David Rubenstein, the Editor-in-Chief of SE Times, for joining us. I'd also like to thank KMS Technology for sponsoring today's webinar, as well as the attendees for joining us. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks, Jacob.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.